How about now? Haha. Maybe that would help if I would have turned my mic on. I didn't even notice that. That's why I asked. Can everybody hear me? Cool. Alright. I see the little, whatchamacallit. See the audio going up. Yes, alright. Cool. Well, technical issues out of the gate. It's all good. Hello. I don't know how to say that in Cyrillic, but hello. I don't know. Yes, we're off to the races. So yeah, good stuff, guys. Cool beanie weenies. Hopefully everybody's Sunday is good and everybody's doing well. I am actually happy to not be pounding away at the keyboard for a little bit. So, why is it? Oh, okay. Well, I'll let the bitrate be lower than what it's supposed to be. That's okay. Appreciate that. We've been working hard on it for a while now. So, appreciate everybody that's joining and so all that good stuff. Pardon me while I mute myself real quick. There we go. All right. Yeah, I went live last Saturday and for about an hour or so. So good stuff. Oh, you like the SD-WAN tutorials, do you? Well, that's good. I'm glad you enjoy them. That was my goal, was to do something. I've been waiting for, not waiting for other people to do a bunch of stuff on YouTube, but nobody had done any SD-WAN stuff on YouTube yet. I mean, there was some stuff, but it was more like high level, what is it, and that type of stuff. But nobody had really done a course on it or a series of videos. And like, hey, why don't I? Something I always wanted to play with and stuff like that. So, but yeah, good stuff, guys. Cool. So this week I'm gonna spend about an hour or so, maybe a little bit longer than that. We'll see how much interaction we get. But I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about the network engineering, the job of network engineering itself, and that type of stuff, and how design is related to that. I got a couple of topologies that we're going to be looking at and stuff like that that I'm working on current courses as we speak to dive into those type of things. So I'll be going back and forth through a couple of different courses and stuff like that to break some stuff down and talk about, design and that type of stuff. Yeah, they should be on the channel. As a matter of fact, if you're on YouTube and you go to my channel and you go to, let's see, if you go to videos, it should be on there. Let's see. Yes, if you go back, it was last week. It was called Weekly Live Stream, and it was about an hour and 15 minutes long or so, and so it's live, so you can watch the recorded version of that if you want to. Cool. I'm glad you liked the SD-WAN video. Well, I'll be covering ZTP. Right now, I don't know if I'm going to be covering ZTP. It's actually one of the topics that I forgot wasn't even an option to cover. I've been so focused on covering policies and that type of stuff that I really had gotten off track. I might. I tested several things out, but I got to the point where I was like, I started to lose interest, to be honest with you, because it was like, started to get monotonous. So I might go back and do some stuff like that, but I don't know. I probably will, but I just don't know when. There's other things that I want to go and mess around with and take a look at. So, but I probably will at some point in the near future. I think that'll be something good to cover and stuff like that. So probably, I just don't know when. As a matter of fact, there's a couple of things that I know I want to go and cover. For example, I know I want to go and take a look at what was it? Application aware routing, so AAR. I want to do that. There's a couple of other ones that I want to go do. I want to test out ZTP to see how it works. I understand the concept to it, but to actually go through and play with it, that's one of my goals. I'm trying to think of what else was there out to do. Do an upgrade. So actually upgrade the from 18.3 to like 19 or 20 and stuff like that, and then do like user administration, some basic stuff like that. That's pretty much going to round it out. I do have a couple of videos I'll be doing, but I've got a pretty good lead time. I've got probably, I don't know, 10 or 15 videos still left to release. So I'm doing a 1-a-day release right now. And so I'm also working on some other content that is going to be more security and enterprise related, so more CCNP targeted material for enterprise and security, because I do plan on going after my CCNP security. So, but I know a lot of people were taking me up on the SD-WAN stuff. But yeah, the intention is there. I just don't know when I'll get to it. It's gonna be sooner than later. I can tell you that. I just had to test it out. I don't release material on content where something doesn't work, because if I go demo it, like for example, I tried service chaining. Was it last night, I think, and I spent probably 2 or 3 hours messing around with it, and I couldn't get it to work. And I watched a couple of videos on some people that had actually gotten it to work, and I followed along, and I'm like, I just don't see where I'm making my mistakes. So it's like one of those things where I understand what it does, and I could probably answer some questions on the test regarding that, but to be honest with you, it's not one of those things where I would spend a ton of time playing with. Same thing with like zero-touch provisioning. It's like I'm probably gonna I'll play with it to see if I can get it to work, but if I can't, it is what it is. Is it possible to put VBond behind NAT? I don't know, honestly. I don't see why you wouldn't be able to put anything behind NAT, as long as you just do a port forward, or you do a static NAT for it. I mean, that would be what I would do. Set it up that way and just put a static NAT in. So yeah, there's the way that you should look at that is no different than you would be any other type of service. You're trying to open up a web server to the internet. You just do a static NAT, right? You give it a dedicated public IP, point people towards that through DNS. DNS goes and looks up the IP. The IP gets, translated, which public IP to point towards, and then boom, you head to that firewall. The firewall NATs it through. So shouldn't really be any different than that. I didn't cover anything sitting behind that for the simple fact of it's really not that complicated. But there's matter of fact, there's some of the SD-WAN training I went through for when I first got into it was on kbits.live. So it's Kawar. He actually does a really good job of covering it, and that's how I got started with it, because he really did a good job of breaking down the individual pieces. And he covered a V-edge behind NAT, and it was just a simple static NAT. And I was like, oh, this is easy. So there was nothing complicated about it. But that's what I would do if you did have a V-bond sitting behind it. But I've never done an SD-WAN deployment, so anything you see here is just me playing around with the technology. So there's no customer that I'm doing a proof of concept for or anything like that, but now I know how SD-WAN works, and I'm sure there's some things in the V-edges that are just maybe the wrong version of code, or I'm doing something wrong. I don't know. I haven't spent enough time on it. I have to go through a few more things a few more times and dig into it more to see what it is that I made mistakes with. But that's half the job is playing with it, so you can figure out what mistakes you made. So you're never going to cover everything right the first time. So, but yeah, good stuff. I know a lot of people are really excited about the SD-WAN stuff, so I do my best to cover a lot of the things that I would suspect a lot of people would want to know and have to work with. So, but yeah, good stuff there. Cool. 27 people. Awesome. Well, I do want to thank everybody that did show up this afternoon to hang out for a little while. I want to talk a little bit about network engineering and not so much about SD-WAN. But if you guys have questions on that type of stuff or you want to have a chat about it, feel free to do so. But I'm going to switch gears a little bit and we're going to start talking a little bit about more the engineering side of the house and stuff like that, because I find that to be something that, not network engineering itself, but more like for those of you that are in a network engineering role, how you would approach that in different design scenarios and stuff like that. So yeah, we're going to go ahead and take a look at that. I'm actually going to switch. Whoops. There we go. So I am over here on I have switched to a different scene. So one of the things that I commonly get asked questions about is how do I go forward dealing with things like I need to deploy XYZ, or I need to I have a deadline to deploy a particular scenario. And to be honest with you, it's one of those things where unless you understand what it is that is being asked of you, then it's gonna be difficult for you to figure out how to approach that solution and actually come up with a viable design, and then be able to take that high level design, figure out what it is that you're going to do, and then convert that over to a low level design and actually implement it. Because everybody knows the difference between a high level design and a low level design. Because if you don't know the difference between the two, it's actually pretty straightforward. So let's say step one in you being tasked with a new project, whatever that might be. So if you're more junior level, right, if you're just getting into the industry and stuff like that, you're going to find that you're not going to get as many complicated projects and stuff like that. So the version of code that I'm using is, it depends on what you're asking for, images. So if you're talking Viptela 18.3, and yes, I use Eve exclusively. So if you want to get a hold of the labs, I've released the topology. So if you become a member, you automatically get a link to download all the stuff that I've done. So I don't just give them out freely. For the SD-WAN stuff I did on the very first video, I released it, but to get the initial configs and stuff like that, it takes a lot of effort to create labs and topologies like this. So I don't just give them out. So if you want to become a member, that's how you would get access to all the initial configs and stuff like that, because I feel like I got to get something for the effort and the work. So, or you're free to, take the topology that you see on your screen here, or this is the SD-WAN topology, and then, recreate it on your own. That's definitely an option for you if you want to do that. So, but yeah, that's basically how you would do that. So going back to what I was talking about a moment ago, if you're tasked with a particular solution, for example, and you are a third-party consultant and you are on site with a customer, and maybe you're dedicated to that customer for the day, or for a 4-hour window, maybe you're there in the morning or something like that. Click on join. So the question was, how do you become a member? Just click on join. So when you're talking to the customer and you're going through and trying to figure out what it is that you're supposed to do, then as you're talking to them, they'll start giving you insight as to what it is they're trying to accomplish. And when you go through and have that conversation, they'll give you information, and sometimes they might not know really what it is that they're looking for or how to go about doing it, and that's really your job to try to fill that information in. So a lot of the customers that I've worked with, they were like, okay, well, we've got this scenario where, like, say for example, they've got 2 internet circuits and they terminating on a single router, and they're like, how do we go from, and they're, let's say one's a gigabit internet connection and the other one's 100 meg. We want the gigabit internet connection to be the primary, and then in the event that it fails, we want to fail over to the secondary. Maybe that's 100 megabit through a different provider. Well, the first thing that I would bring up is, well, that's a single point of failure. So if that router dies or loses power, then your site doesn't have any internet at all. So I would automatically recommend, from a high-level design, I would automatically recommend taking one of those internet circuits and moving it to a different router. That's the very first thing I would recommend doing, because now you're automatically adding in some high availability and some resiliency to the environment. So by taking those 2 internet circuits and moving them off of the same box into 2 different routers, then you've got 2 different ways of getting off the network. Now, in order for this to work beyond that type of connection, you have to keep in mind that when you're looking at internet failover, you've got the primary internet circuit going out, and you've got NAT configured on that to allow the traffic to go out to the internet. Well, if, for example, that internet circuit goes down, what should end up happening is, through some basic dynamic routing. So, for example, you don't need to do any dynamic routing if you don't want to. You can, depending on how large the environment is. Maybe static routing doesn't make sense. Maybe you have HSRP set up, and in the event that the internet circuit goes down, maybe you're doing some tracking of a default route, for example. And if the default route goes away to the public internet, then HSRP will detect that, and then automatically, by the 10 seconds or whatever timer values you apply to it, then it fails over to the secondary router. That becomes your new default gateway, so it goes from one router to the other, and your backup internet circuit, that 100 meg link, for example, or whatever it might be even another gig link, right? But HSRP fails you over to the other internet circuit, and you go out that way. So from a high-level design, we can explain to the customer how we would take that into consideration. How do we, remove the single point of failure by having 2 internet circuits tied into the single router, and then you go flip over and you add another router, and then you cable that into the existing environment. There's a couple different ways you can pull it off. If it's just if it's a small branch office and they don't have a dynamic routing, or maybe it doesn't make sense to do dynamic routing, then you can go through and use like HSRP or VRP or something along those lines to, if router 1, the primary, goes down, then you fail over to the secondary router for the internet, and then HSRP kicks you over to the other router. After the timeout after the HSRP timers die, then HSRP swings you over to the other router. You still have internet. There might be a little bit of a lag, but for the most part, it's not going to be too terribly involved. But the cool thing is now your site is back online and you have internet access again. If your environment's a little bit bigger and more involved, then it might be worth your time and effort to go and do some dynamic routing. So, for example, if you've got some core switches that are sitting southbound of your edge routers, then you can go and have, like, for example, EIGRP or OSPF. I like OSPF a little bit more than I do EIGRP, because with OSPF I can go and enable the default information originate command and on the edge router, and then as long as there's actually a default route in the routing table, then OSPF will automatically propagate the default route to the rest of the OSPF domain. But in the event that static route goes away, because of, for example, the connectivity goes away, that link goes down or something along those lines, then you can pull that away, the default route goes away, OSPF no longer is propagating that default route, and then you can send the traffic over, The other router is going to start advertising the default route, or it already had been advertising the default route. Maybe the primary router is OSPF type E1, which is more preferred than OSPF E2. So if the E1 route is removed, then E1 is no longer in the OSPF database, no longer in the OSPF routing table. Then you fail over to your secondary router and you go through, advertise that as an E2 secondary route, and now you're pointing out towards your secondary router. Again, high level design, it's more or less how that kind of concept would come into play. So in the event that you have that problem, now what you would do is you would need to convert that high level design, or the HLD, over to an LLD, or a low level design. And then you would need to convert the high level design to low level by actually going through and configuring all this stuff. And then testing it out, setting up a lab like I've got here, and playing around with those options. Doing that is going to give you the ability of testing this stuff out, making sure it's going to work the way you anticipate it to, and then now you've got a working configuration. You can take that working configuration that you tested out and verify that it's operational, and on the gear that you're actually going to deploy this stuff on, you can actually you've got the templates, right? You got the configuration already squared away. You've already tested it. It's already working. So you can move that tested configuration on those, whatever environment you're working on, and then put that on the gear that you're going to be deploying, the physical hardware. And by doing that, you've eliminated a lot of the risk of the deployment. So you're not sitting there having to manually type the commands in and like hoping and praying it's going to work. Obviously, you're still going to need to test it. You'll shut down the interface, and that'll trigger the failover to kick in. Or maybe you pull the upstream cable. Maybe you don't physically unplug your local router's interface. Maybe you unplug the remote end so that it's, the interface itself is physically plugged in. In that case, it really wouldn't matter. But if you were to power off the modem or something like that, or do some sort of upstream connectivity issue, maybe pull one of the things that I've done in the past is take the coax cable or the actual phone line out of the DSL modem, and which keeps the modem online. It keeps the physical interface up, but it simulates an upstream failure. And then by doing that, your default route should go away. Therefore, whether you're doing layer 2 high first hop redundancy failover through HSRP, VRRP, or you're doing dynamic routing, you can swing your traffic over to the other router once it's good to go and propagate the default route to the rest of your environment. So it gives you a lot of flexibility in terms of doing that type of stuff. So when you go from a high level design to a low level design, that's really where the workload increases, and because the fact now you got to type the commands in, you got to get everything up and running, you got to do your testing. That's the bulk of your work. Yeah, exactly. It does. What's up, Danny? I just saw your message pop in. Yeah, that definitely does bring in the importance of labbing in general, whether it's a home lab or otherwise, because if you're not testing this stuff out before you get to the deployment, you don't want to be figuring stuff out during the deployment. I learned this very early on in my career, working with some senior guys, that it's like I didn't want to be trying to, figure out how to get something to work while I'm on site with the customer. I was figuring that stuff out ahead of time, and I'm glad I did, because that gave me more confidence that things were going to work. And then you can test the failover and know that the customer is going to be in good shape when they're all said and done. Because at the end of the day, you got to, I worked as a server back when I was in high school, and I served food in a restaurant. So, customers, they pay your bills, right? You live on tips. Well, if that's the case, then you need to make sure that you're giving the customer that you're deploying this solution for the same level of commitment, and giving them the same level of importance to their network that they deserve. Because at the end of the day, if you can't get something to work, somebody else will. So, but that was more or less one of the examples that I wanted to go out and give you, because one of the things that I see a lot of people struggle with is the concept of taking what they're tasked with and doing day in and day out. You know, people are like, well, I don't understand. When do I actually, do I type the commands in? And there's nothing wrong with you doing that, right? But the cool thing is when you do things ahead of time, you've got a lab. If you do you need to take your labs to the level of the lab that's on my screen? No. But I do recommend that you play around with the technologies that you're going to be putting into a customer's environment. And if you don't do that, that's when you're going to run into problems. You know, you might have. I remember one specific customer that I worked with that they ended up having DMVPN deployed with Phase 3, and they had bridge domains set up and a bunch of other stuff. It was multiple layers of configuration added to this environment. It became doing certain things to try to get this customer's network to where it needed to be and be stable and operational became more and more difficult. So what I ended up doing was I sat down with them. I said, okay, here's what we need to do. We need to dial this in a little bit more cleanly, and like on a Saturday afternoon, I'll come in and we'll rip out this config, replace it with this config, because you guys wanted to per tunnel QoS over DMVPN. This is what we need to do. We need to go through and get rid of the bridge domains that don't have a shaper on them and put this config in place and do that type of stuff, because that's really where the meat and taters of the deployment comes into play, is identifying what needs to be done and getting it, implementing it. And that's when labbing this stuff up is really, really important. Because if you don't do that, then, that's when you're going to run into problems. I would hate to see any one of you guys go out and try to deploy something and it doesn't work because you didn't put in the due diligence to get everything up and running that you need to. Not everything is going to be labable, right? So, for example, Cisco ACI or SD Access. There are some solutions out there, we all know what they are, that you just can't lab them up in Eve. They're not something you can just download some virtual machines, deploy them in ESXi, and blammo, you're off to the races. Doesn't always work that way. So, not everything will be foolproof, right? But the point being is if you go out and you talk to the customers and get them squared away the way they need to be, then you eliminate a lot of the problems that you do your best at trying to eliminate the problems that are there. No, I don't do any work for INE, and I haven't for a very, very long time. I saw that they put out some new stuff for SD-WAN. It is what it is, but my goal, I don't have any conversations with them going on currently to do anything for SD-WAN. So, nice thing about it is, you don't have to worry about trying to go out and do it because it's already right here on YouTube. Oh my goodness, we have some royalty in the house. What's up, The Dark Knight? It's going well, man. It's going well. No complaints. Pardon me. Good stuff. Yeah, so what Dirk is referring to is doing what I just mentioned. Pre-staging the configs, testing that type of stuff out, practicing at home. It's difficult to get people to do that when they come in during the work day. And there's nothing wrong with doing that during the work week. I do that a lot. Testing configs out and making sure things are going to work and stuff like that. Because when you do your deployment on the weekend, do you really want to, let's say, for example, you've got a 4-hour maintenance window. I know for a fact that I don't want to take up a 4-hour maintenance window the entire time. I'd rather finish an hour or two early with my maintenance window, get everything in, get it knocked out, and be in good shape versus trying to hustle through it and I'm 3.5 hours in and I don't see the end of the light coming anytime soon. So, but yeah, you're exactly right. That's one thing that, for those of you that are just getting into the industry and stuff like that, I highly recommend that anytime you have the opportunity of testing something out ahead of time, treat your labbing and stuff like that the same way you would your job. You know, you want to make sure that you're testing stuff out ahead of time and making sure that it's going to work. Because, you know, you get to a customer site and the customer's like, you know, like, come on, man, it's like 4 hours. Yeah, it's pretty sad if they won't do it during the workday. I mean, I would, maybe that's a conversation you have to escalate to the manager. Hopefully you're not the manager, but, oh, you're welcome for the playlist. I'll actually, regarding the playlist, that'll be, once the SD-WAN videos are done, then I will continue to tweet out about the SD-WAN playlist and stuff like that, so you guys can keep an eyeball on all that type of stuff. So good stuff. So good stuff there. So, but yeah, hopefully, maybe it's time for, if you're trying to get someone to do something that they're not doing, maybe it's time to escalate that conversation to a manager, and, you know, hopefully that they can, you know, explain to people what's going on. Get me a job. Well, you know what? I can point you in the right direction, but I mean, there are ways of getting jobs. You just got to apply to them. Hopefully that'll work out for you. Go get a couple certs on your resume and be honest in your interview. Good stuff. That's actually kind of funny, actually. So I personally am working on some really cool stuff. Obviously, other than the SD-WAN stuff. So everybody, I don't really want to spend a ton of time talking about SD-WAN, but it seems like that's the big topic of everybody's like all excited about SD-WAN. I'm not exactly sure why, to be honest with you. I mean, it's just another way of deploying a tunnel-based solution. I mean, at the end of the day, that's really what it is. And you're doing it through a GUI and not from the command line. That is true. I like that. That's a good analogy. That is very, very true. So, does everybody understand the concept of taking a high-level design and converting that into? Oh my goodness, you want more SD-WAN? Are you in the middle of a deployment or something? Because it's like seems like you've been eating up all the SD-WAN stuff. But I'm curious. That seems like all you guys want to talk about is SD-WAN. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I mean, I'm sure it's cool, but I don't see the buzz about it. It is what it is. Is there anything specific for SD-WAN? I mean, I've covered a lot, but I'm sure there's some stuff that you guys want covered, like zero-touch provisioning. I haven't touched that. But there are more videos coming out. As a matter of fact, I just released a video a couple of hours ago, an hour and a half ago on NAT. So it's coming out. They're certainly coming out. Just it takes a little bit to get them all done and to upload them and all that good stuff that goes along with it. So but other than that, more SD-WAN, please. I'm going to need a little bit more context than that, buddy. I would drop all the videos at one time, but then, you know, The problem with that is the view counts just go down and nobody seems to really care. Let's see. Everything's looking pretty good. Pretty good. Okay, cool. Well, I do want to thank everybody for coming out to the live stream and stuff like that. I don't plan on giving up right now, but we can definitely continue talking. My goal is to talk more about design and engineering and how that can apply to the job, because it seems like that's something that aspiring engineers, more junior level folks to working their way up to the mid-level seem to struggle with. So I was trying to provide you some insight on the aspects of how the engineering role works and some things that you should be taking into consideration for that. But it's all good. Let's see. This is my security topology that I'm going to be rolling out here soon. So who's studying for their a CCNP, whether it's in enterprise or security? Anybody studying for that type of stuff? I'm curious to see what the feedback is on that. Or is everybody just studying SD-WAN? It's all good if you guys are, but wow, I didn't know I could put a user in timeout. That's kind of crazy. Good stuff. Cool. Well, in that case, I had the dog barking outside. So, in terms of let's continue the high-level design, low-level design conversation, because that seems to be. Let's take this a little bit deeper. So, let's focus on, where do I want to go with this? Let's look over here. Talking about how, or we're just talking about how we would go about doing, like, we have a default route here and we have a default route here, and then how you would take the design and take a high level design and convert that to a low level design. So there's a couple different ways. Again, you could do this. You could do it with dynamic routing. So for example, this could be a /30 subnet here and a /30 subnet here, and then a /30 subnet here, and you could be doing routing across all of these. So this would be an adjacency between these two guys here, another adjacency here between these two, and then an adjacency here between these guys. Now, I would prefer dynamic routing because that would make more sense to me, because I could affect that a little bit more easily, and I can have, say, HSRP here and HSRP here working and accomplish the same goal. So I can actually have high availability for the gateway as well as connectivity out towards the internet through the internet routers set up as well. So if we're gonna, I prefer OSPF over EIGRP, mainly for the fact that it's vendor neutral, right? I can plug this into any vendor's equipment and it's going to work exactly the way that I want it to. So I can take OSPF and form adjacencies between all these devices, and then in the event that, say, this guy is our primary egress point, let's say this is a 1 gigabit connection right here, and this is a 100 meg connection here. If this link goes down for whatever reason, and I need to fail over to this link, if I'm using OSPF and I type in the default info orig, so which is default information originate, here, and the default route goes away, then the default route that was getting advertised from 16 down to switch 34 gets removed. And over on this side, I would actually have the default information originate on, well, actually, let me move the notifications thingy out of the way so I can keep drawing there. What I would do is I would set the default information originate command, and I would add in the metric type of E1. Because from an OSPF state machine perspective, E1 is going to be more preferred over E2. So I can actually have both routers doing a default information originate propagation, right? This guy can also do a default info originate, but if I leave off the metric type of E1 and just leave it E2, then this will be my primary egress point, this will be my secondary egress point. And in the event that my internet goes down on router 16, then I'm going to remove the default information originate metric type E1 from the routing table, and then this guy right here, this 100 meg circuit, will actually get injected into the routing table. It's already there, right? It's already been propagated inside of the OSPF database to all the devices. So what ends up happening then is the E1 route gets removed. So the E1 route that would be here and here is removed and replaced with an E2 route on both. But instead of going this way for internet, you would no longer do that. You would go this way for internet. And that would, so now you have seen how the high level design would be converted to a low level design. You would actually lab this up, get it configured, and test it out to make sure it's going to work the way that it's advertised. And if you do that, then that will give you the flexibility of setting up the config so that when you go to actually deploy this at a customer site and get it up and running, you're good. You know it's going to work. And then you do your testing. You test it out to make sure it's going to do what you expect it to. And then, assuming that you've done everything correctly, then it should. And then you can make sure that it's going to do the job that your high-level design is saying it's going to go do. The cool thing about doing that is when you do that, the customer is going to have that warm, fuzzy feeling that, okay, you know, this guy knows what he's doing, or this gal knows what she's doing, and I can relax and feel rest assured that in the event that there's a problem here, everything's going to work the way that it needs to. Now, what's another scenario that might tie into this that could potentially become problematic? Well, I've got DMBPN here and I've got DMBPN here, right? I've got two spokes. So in the event that there's a problem with my connectivity here at the primary, let's say this is hub 1 and this is hub 2. If I've got hub 1 that's internet connection goes down and I've got hub 2, is there any way for me to fail from hub 1 to hub 2? 100% there is. You can absolutely get that up and running. So you can have what they refer to as a prioritization where you cluster them. So you put, in this case here, I've got one location with two hubs, right? If I want to configure DMBPN to form a connection to both this guy right here as well as this guy right here across both, is that going to be supported? Absolutely, that'll be supported. And the cool thing about doing that is if in the event that this tunnel goes down and this tunnel goes down, then I can immediately fail over to hub 2, still have access to the rest of the infrastructure and all the communication that goes along with it, and it gives me that much more flexibility in terms of the operations. So even though my tunnels might go down at the hub on hub 1 at the HQ location, hub 2 is still up and running at that same location. My DMVPN connections stay online and I'm operational. And that's really where understanding the high level design how that comes into play is important. Because now I can say, yes, that'll work, and I can then convert that to a low level design. But you have to figure out the details. And the only way you're going to know how that all comes into play is by playing around with the technology and then configuring it so that or you'll have to play around with the configs to get it to the expected results. But once you do, that'll give you that much more flexibility in terms of the operations. So, for example, if I go through and do this, I can get this all working, and then the customer's like, okay, well, I'm not really sure what to do. Perfect. We can go ahead and, I'll demo it up and maybe circle back a week later. I spend a few days getting this up and running, test it out, make sure it's going to work the way that we need it to, and then get the config in play, right? And I've actually sold quite a few projects just by having a working solution in play, and that really, really helps in terms of the operations and things like that, because when you do that, you're providing a value to the customer, and customers like when you're their advocate, right? If they feel like you're on their side, they're much more likely to be willing to work with you on a long-term basis, and because they know that you want them to be successful, and that really helps them get that warm, fuzzy feeling from you that everything's going to be good. Now, for those of you that are studying for the new CCIEs, like I am, I'm currently focused. I've got to focus on NP security and then eventually IE security. And I know from seeing the new lab exams that there's going to be a low-level design configuration piece to it, and I'm looking forward to it for the reasons that it just looks cool. But there are going to be things that are going to be interesting to see exactly how it all plays out. So I'm interested to see how the low-level design piece comes into play. But that's one area of the exam that I see a lot of people that are studying for the CCIE that they're worried about. And the reason why I think a lot of people are worried about it is because there's this low-level design scares people. It's easy to talk at a high level, right? Because this basically what I'm drawing out here on the whiteboard is high level. But if I was to start taking and building the config to try to get this up and running, then that would be converting it to a low-level design. Because now you're taking what you've explained to the customer and then you're flipping it over to low-level design, getting the config in play in order for you to roll it out to do what you needed to do. And that's what really comes into play with the customer, is trying to get them to understand, we're going to have to test this out and get it up and working the way that we expect it to, and stuff like that. So once you do that, once you get more into the operations side of the house and play around with it, you'll see what I mean more and more and more. But I definitely think you have to lab this stuff up. There's really no excuse for it. If you're going to be in this industry for a long time, and you're going to have to lab it up. I know a lot of guys that they're like, Friday at 5 o'clock comes, they're checked out. Unless they have a change window coming up, they're done. There's nothing wrong with that per se, but there's going to be a point in time where you're going to need to spend extra hours and playing around with stuff and getting it working. So, but anyway, that is pretty much what I wanted to cover in this session. So hopefully some people found that useful, because I know I did when I had that conversation with some other folks and stuff like that. And hopefully that you guys got something out of it as well. So I'm pretty much done for today, since we're approaching the 1 hour mark. I do want to thank everybody for hanging out with me in the live stream. And, whoop, that's weird. I don't want to add, somehow I clicked on add inserted. That's weird. Anyway, but that's basically what it is that I wanted to go over. If you guys have any ideas for next week's live session, we'll go for about an hour or so. I'm thinking you guys are going to want to do something SD-WAN related, which if that's the case, so be it. We can figure something out. But if you guys could leave me some comments as some ideas of what you guys want me to cover or dive into, that would be extremely helpful for me, because then I'll know what you guys will be looking for in terms of the that type of stuff. So, but other than that, that's pretty much it for me for this afternoon. But I do want to thank you guys for hanging out with me and getting everything squared away and hanging out for a little bit and chit-chatting for a bit. It was all good. So I will put a message on the community, and I'll put a tweet out there for hopefully people will respond to it and stuff like that, give me some ideas. But as of right now, I really don't have any ideas. But I'm sure I'll figure something out between here and today and tomorrow. So I'm personally going to start diving more into. I actually want to play around with the email security appliance, the ESA. I watched some videos on it last night, and I was like, oh, this is actually kind of cool. So I'm going to go and figure out how to get a free email client working and start playing around with email a little bit to see exactly if I can get that to work. Because web security is a piece of cake, because then it's proxy, but email security is a little bit more involved. So I'm kind of wanting to put the time and effort into that, because I want to take this topology right here. I want to add the email security appliance to it somewhere, and the web security appliance, and then I also want to add in the ESA to do email security. So I think that'd be kind of cool to play around with and get that working. So I'll put some content out regarding that as well in the near future, because that's going to be something I know people are going to be wanting to dive into. So, but anyway, thanks everybody for hanging out with me in this video or in this live stream. So again, we're going to keep going week after week. I'm probably going to maintain this Sunday afternoon for about an hour schedule. So yeah, good stuff. Thanks again for stopping by and hanging out with me in the stream, and I will catch all of you next week, same bat time, same bat channel. No pun intended for the Dark Knight. So cool. Good stuff, guys. Thanks for stopping by and hanging out, and I will catch all of you next week. I'm watching the live stream taper off now. Cool, guys. Take it easy.